Do you want to try a new bag pattern but you're afraid because you never done binding before, or you just simply don't like binding? Don't worry. In this tutorial, I'll show you how to make binding easier for your bags. Because binding gives your bags a good structure and adds kind of like a frame. So it's for some patterns it's just really necessary. But first, let's start with making our own bias tape. So if you only need a little piece of bias, I will show you first how to do it. So check your ruler and find the 45-degree marking line here on your ruler. See, this is the 45-degree line. And then take your fabric and place this ruler on your fabric so you align the self edge with the 45-degree marking. So if you only need like a little piece of binding, this is how I would do it. I align the marking for the 45-degree angle with the self edge of the fabric, and then I just cut whatever strip I need in whatever length. I cut my bias tape about 4 centimeters wide, which is 1.5 inches, and that's just the ideal width for my bags. But of course, usually we don't need like a tiny strip like that. I mean, it's nice if you're missing just a little piece, but we would waste a lot of fabric like that. So let's cut out a square, maybe of 35 centimeters, and repeat the progress. You know, we align the marking for the 45-degree on the ruler with the self edge of the fabric, and then we just cut it in half. So we do have 2 triangles now, and I remember it like this. You see, the left side is the valley and the right side is the mountain. You put this like next to each other, and then right side on right side, the sides that are right next to the valley and the mountain. That's just a good way to remember it. And then you just clip the sides, and we will sew this edge with 1 centimeter seam allowance, 3/8-inch seam allowance. So when this is sewn together, you're gonna place it back on your cutting mat and open the seam allowance. You can either finger press it or take an iron so that everything stays in place. And then you take your ruler again and draw lines on it, 4 centimeters wide, 1.5 inch, and you just keep making these lines up until you get to the top edge. So usually you won't have a perfect match here, so you need to trim off the top leftover fabric, and then take your ruler again and make a marking on the short ends, like a cross on the line, 1 centimeter or 3/8-inch from the short edge, because it will help you to align the fabrics in a moment. See, you place it like this, and the second line will connect with the first line from the other end, and taking a pin is very helpful. So you pin it through the cross that you've made and through the second cross, so the 2 lines are exactly on top of each other, and then you align the short edges and take some clips to secure them. And then again, you will sew this line with 1 centimeter seam allowance, 3/8-inch. Basically, you just sew the line that you've drawn there. When you've placed the fabric under the sewing machine, under the sewing needle, of course, not under the machine, make sure that you fold the seam allowance open. the seam allowance of in the beginning and maybe at the end, it needs to be folded open. And then you sew these two edges together. Now we are almost ready with our bias tape. We just need to cut it. So I will open up this seam again, finger press it or take an iron, and then you just cut along the long endless line that you have created right now. When the fabric was aligned perfectly, thanks to our pin, that should be no problem. So you have one endless, well, it's not endless because it will end at some point, but you get what I mean, right? You just cut as long as possible all the way through the end of the fabric. So this is a very long piece of bias tape. I just trim off the beginning and the end just to have like a straight line. And now our bias tape is ready to be attached onto our gusset. Because most of the projects we need bias tape for, I was measuring right here, so I think I've made 2 meters 55. I'm not sure how much that is in yard, but it's enough. So now we will attach it to our gusset. You see, this is the piece that we just cut in one piece. Of course, it's nice because you don't have any seam allowance in between, but it's pretty wasteful. So we will attach it to the right side of our lining piece. So take your gusset ring, place the beginning of the bias tape, align the side edges, and we will see this is right sides together. So the seam allowance here is up, and we won't begin at the top. We will begin about 5 centimeters, which is 2 inches from the beginning, and fold this over in a moment. So we're at the sewing machine and we will baste this together really close to the edge, and we will start after like 5 centimeters or 2 inches from the beginning of the bias tape and just baste everything together. So we have the main fabric from the gusset, we have the lining fabric from the gusset, and on top we have our bias tape. We fold the seam allowance open so it's thinner and smoother like that. And when we get to the point where the zippers are, of course we put them out of the way. Now we're on top of the zipper. Here's the beginning of the bias. So you fold this like a triangle to the side, place the end of the bias above, and keep sewing maybe like 1 or 2 centimeters over the fold. And then you can cut off the thread, and we will cut off any extra. See, this is how it looks like. This is from underneath the bias tape to right here, and then we will trim this off and trim this off. So take your scissors and trim off any extra and use the rest of the bias tape to attach it to the other side of the gusset. So you just flip it over, put it on the other side, place this right sides together, and basically attach it the same way that you just did. Start maybe 5 centimeters from the beginning, 2 inches from the beginning, fold the seam allowance open, and sew, baste together the whole round, all pieces of the gusset and the bias tape. If you have a small gusset like this one, we are making the busy bee right here, the small version. You have to make sure not to sew through any of the bias tape from the other side. I mean, this one is not long enough, but sometimes you have gussets where this might be in the way. So make sure that you're just sewing through the bias tape from this side and not from the other one. Okay, that's that. We've attached our bias tape to the gusset, and we're trimming off any extra that is left from the side and leftover tape. And then we will just proceed with our sewing pattern like we normally would. This is how it looks like close up. So in this case, I will mark the centers on my gusset piece and mark the centers on my front or back or whatever piece I want to attach this to, and then just attach it like I would normally do. So I make this a little bit quicker for you, just so you can see how everything attached. See, this is the front from the Busy Bee. This is the small version. So I marked the centers here as well, the top and the bottom center. And then we place this right sides together. I made this really quick right here because this tutorial is about the binding process and not about how to sew the Busy Bee. But of course, if you have the pattern, you'll find the video link in the pattern ebook, I think page 7 or 8. So you can definitely make your own and watch a video on how to sew this pattern. So now you will see what a piece looks like when it's connected to the front. So first I basted on there, the gusset, and then I sew it with the correct seam allowance. And since the gusset is connected and the bias tape was connected to the gusset, we've made 2 steps in one. So you just have to pull up the bias tape, just push it out of the seam as far as possible, check if everything's okay, and then you fold the bias tape towards the open edge and then fold over again, and then take a clip to secure the piece. On the curve, it should be no problem because we've cut this on a 45-degree angle. If you just cut a straight bias tape, it won't lay flat and nicely above the curves. You would have wrinkles and folds. So work your way around the whole piece. We will do this at the end. We will go from the other side. If you have a part with seam allowance here, fold the seam allowance open and just keep on doing the same process and attach everything with clips. And now I will explain you how to make a nice transition so you don't see the beginning and the end too much. Of course you can tell where the beginning and the end is from the bias, but it's a nice way to do this because we made the triangle here. So you just fold the bottom piece in and fold the other one above, and you make sure that the whole thing is covered so that the bottom and the top are the same width. And then just check if everything's covered nicely, and then we can sew the bias tape with a few stitches just to secure it. So now we will top stitch 1 round. Make sure nothing is like wrinkly or folds or everything, but if you put your clips in there correctly, you should not have any problem. You just sew everything together and hopefully you catch the seam on the bottom, that the bias tape is well folded. You should not have any issues. So when you finish your rounds, you just have to lock your stitch, and that was basically it. This is how you do your binding. Let's have a closer look now. I just cut off any extra thread and check if I if everything's sewn together the way I want it, if I like how it looks, if there are no wrinkles or folds, if I did not miss a spot. Just take the time to check, because now is the time to reopen and do it again if you don't like it. But this looks good to me. All that there's left is repeat the same process with the other side. So we will attach the back just like that. And there we're done. Yeah, it wasn't that bad, right? Are you still scared to try this on your own? I mean, I can understand that, because when I first started making bags, I was kind of afraid of patterns that include bias. But it takes a bit of a practice, and the more often you repeat this technique, the better you'll get. So don't be too mean to yourself. Take some time to practice and learn, and I'm sure with this little hack, it'll be easy for you in the future. So I hope you try some patterns now that you stepped away from maybe. So this is the Busy Bee, for example. It's a very cute crossbody pattern. Or the Daycation bag or the Bricks bag. Many of my patterns, they do have binding, and I like the way they look just because of the binding. It gives them structure and a certain shape, like a frame, and it's a really nice technique that you should try. So I hope to see you soon again, and I hope we can make some more bags in the future together.